Today, we're making a 6x4 Wargaming table for less than the price of a box of Space Marines, and that's coming right up. Welcome back, and it's great to have you here. So, given the price of a lot of commercial gaming tables, the GW one's what, $500 odd? Yeah, that sounds about right. And even gaming mats can run into the hundreds of dollars. So, today, we are going to make a Wargaming board, not really a table because it won't have legs, for less than the price of a box of Space Marines, which here in Australia is 55 Australian dollary-doos. So, how are we going to beat that? Well, you'll just have to watch and come along on this journey of discovery. But before we get into that, if this is your first time here, here's what's up. If you want to improve your wargaming, make your tabletop battles more epic, and give your wargaming budget more power, be sure to smash the subscribe button below and ding the bell. That way you won't miss anything. Now, let's check out how we're going to make this battlefield. Okay, so here's all the stuff that we're going to use. We have not one, not two, but 3 of these foam insulation boards, which are 2 foot by 4 foot. So we can use 3 to make a 6 foot by 4 foot table. They were $12.50 each. We have some alloy tube, which is 12 millimeters outer diameter with a 1 mil wall thickness, giving us a 10 mil inner diameter. That's important. They were $3 each. Then we have this 10 millimeter steel rod that was $5, and we have some 10 millimeter rare earth magnet things. They were $6 or $7. There's 25 here, but we're only going to need 16. Then, of course, you're going to need glue. We're going to need gap filler because the edge of these boards are a bit rough and we just want to make them smooth just so it looks a bit nicer. Going to need a knife for any cutting we do. I'm going to put some trenches for lava flows in my board, so we're going to use a chisel for that. We have a drill with a 12 millimeter drill bit for putting holes in the board, which you will see soon. Painter's tape, masking tape, and I have an angle grinder here for chopping up our steel and aluminium, but you can use whatever cutting device you have. And, of course, we have a ruler for measuring stuff. So, let's get started. So the basic design of this is we're going to have 4 magnets running along the edges of the boards so that they can clamp together. Now, to do this, we could just, put a tiny indent and pop the magnet in, but it's not going to be very strong. So, given that we don't want the magnet to rip out, we want to give it a bit of an anchor to secure it in place. So that's where this steel rod comes in. It is 10 mil, just like our magnets, and 1 meter long, and we need 16 bits out of it. So, we're going to cut it into 50 millimeter sections. So, you're going to take your red marker, and that is the first thing I forgot to mention at the start that we're also going to need, and there will likely be more. So now, we have a things I forgot counter. And we're going to take our ruler, and we're going to line it up at the end, find the 50 mil mark, and we are just going to mark it off, like so. And then, we're going to do a 10 mil, and all the way along until we have 16 pieces. So now we're going to bring in one of our alloy tubes, line it up right next to our piece of steel, and let it roll away. Line up next to our piece of steel, and we're going to put the same marks on the alloy tube, so that we now have marks on both. And I don't know how well you can see it, but it looks something like this. And it looks like we only needed the 1 alloy tube, so that's $3 we've saved right there. Okay, so I've now clamped it up in my vise, and that's the second thing I forgot to tell you about. You're going to need something to clamp it down with. You can just use a G-clamp to clamp it to a table, but I have a vise, so I'm going to use that. And you want to make sure that your marks all line up, because now we're going to just slice them all off, starting at that end, and going that way, because otherwise it'll fall out of the vise. So I'm going to do that off camera because it's going to send sparks flying everywhere. If you use like a rotary tool or something like that, you will produce less sparks. Okay, so I've gone and cut them all out, and now I have 16 50mm long steel bars and 16 50mm long alloy tubes that I have cleaned up and cleaned up the inside as well, and gotten it to a point where if I take my magnets on the end of my bit of steel, it passes straight through fairly cleanly, relatively speaking. And by that I mean it actually passes through it all and doesn't catch on anything. You need to make sure your magnets can go through on all of your tubes before you move on, but once they do, you can move on to the next stage. So if you don't have any of the tools you need to cut it up, if you get your stuff from a steel yard, there's a chance they'll be able to cut it to the size you want anyway. Otherwise, most hardware stores will rent you the tools you need to cut this stuff up. And remember, safety first. Glasses and earplugs are a must, otherwise you will go deaf and blind and you will be dumb. Okay, so our next step is we need to put holes in our foam board for these pins to go into, to hold our magnets into our board so they can clip together. Given that all your bits of metal are going to be slightly different lengths because, well, cutting very precisely is difficult with hand tools, you want to find the sort of the longest one, which would probably be this one. You want to put it next to your drill bit so that it goes down towards the end. You get your masking tape and you take a bit of it and you just want to wrap it around the drill bit at the end of your piece of tube, like so. This way you'll have a visible mark on your drill bit for when to stop pushing the drill bit into your foam board. Okay, so for this next bit, we're going to take our 3 foam boards, put them together so they line up nicely, and we want to mark some marks in them for where we're going to drill our holes. So I'm going to put one mark at 200mm on each side, and then another mark at 400mm from the end, like so. So there's a mark there and a mark there, and then do the same at the other end and on the other side. And once I've done those, I can then take my ruler, line up with my 2 marks, and draw a line straight down connecting them. So I now have a line that is 200mm long, and a line that is 400mm along, like so. And you do that at the other end, so that you have 4 lines on each long edge of the board. And we'll do the same on the other side as well. Awesome, and you'll have 4 lines on each of the long edges that line up nicely. Okay, so the next thing you need to do is, if you don't have a drill press, you want to set your drill up in your vise like so that it's sticking out, and then you get your good old-fashioned bubble level app, sit it on your drill, check to see what level it is. At the moment it says it is down 1.6 degrees, and on the table 1.6 degrees. So that means that the plane of this matches the table that is going to be our reference point, which means if we put something on here and push it onto there, it will give a perfectly straight hole, which is exactly what we want. I've gotten this bumper bar I had laying around and a bit of foam just to prop it up, and it brings it up to the right height so the drill goes pretty much in the center of the bit of foam. And it should work quite nicely with our little test piece there. So now we get our full board and we're going to drill holes. Okay, so you can turn your drill on and lock it so that it stays on, and then you want to make sure that your foam stays nice and flat. It doesn't matter if it rocks this way, because I mean the drill's going to spin, but it's this direction that you want to make sure that it lines up and is nice and straight. And you also want to make sure your drill's spinning the right direction and your tape is wrapped around it in a direction that's not going to just unravel. just like that. And as you can see, we now have a nice straight hole straight down that line, like so. Now you do the exact same thing, taking it up to the tape mark on all 16 of your holes, and it will be ready for you to start sticking magnets and pegs in. Okay, so I finished drilling the holes, and in 2 of the boards I only put the holes on one side because one of them needs it on both sides to be the centerpiece, and the other 2 don't because the outer edge is not going to have anything stuck to it. Duh. Now, you want to make sure that you keep all your boards up the same way now, because there's a good chance that we didn't quite get the hole perfectly center up this way. So making sure that they're all up the same way will make sure that your magnets line up nicely. So basically what we're going to do now is we're going to get our alloy pins, and we are going to just push them down into place and make sure that they go into each of the holes nicely. Awesome, so that fits quite nicely. Now we can put our foam boards aside for a moment while we prepare our magnets and tubes and stuff. Okay, so you want to take your magnets and split them so that you have 2 piles of 8, and you want to keep them on opposite sides of your desk so that they don't try to clip together. And we want to take 8 of our alloy tubes and split them so that you've got 8 of each on each side. So you want to get a bit of PVA wood glue, and the reason we're using that is because it has a nice amount of flexibility, but it is still quite strong. Another alternative is araldite, but if you use that, you want to make sure that it is well and truly set before you put these things into the foam, otherwise it could melt the foam. So we're going to take our magnets, and we are going to separate them and put them onto our pieces of steel. Always making sure that we choose the flattest, squarest side of our steel. And while you are doing this, try to keep your magnets spaced apart, or they will try to grab together. Like that. Exactly like that. Cool. And then you want to make sure they're all facing the same way by getting 2, having the magnets face each other, and try to bring them in. And if they repel, then that means that they're both have the steel on the same pole. Excellent, so they all have the steel on the same pole. Now we're going to knock over all of our alloy tubes. So now that we've got all of our magnets stuck to our pieces of steel quite nicely, this is where we bring in our glue, and we're just going to put a little bit down the alloy tubes, making sure that it goes all the way around, like so. Then you can bring your magnet and piece of steel in, press it into the tube, and push it up. And it will line the inside of the tube quite nicely. And then any excess glue you can have just kind of run off. And you want to put that face down somewhere clean so that you actually doesn't matter because we're going to have these inserted into the foam before the glue dries. So you do that with all of these 8. Okay, so once you have those 8 done, we're going to move on to the other 8. Now, these ones we want to have the opposite polarity. So we're going to get our magnets, and we're going to bring them in, and we're going to have them stick. Okay, so that's the opposite polarity. Which means we want this end to be stuck to the steel. And if you can do it without having the thing pull apart, that's even better. So now we repeat that process over here. Obviously, just we have the opposite polarity. Now, if you even suspect that the magnets may have flipped on you, check, because this is the stage where you can check fairly easily. So I'm just going to put my thumb over the end, bring the other one in, they attract, so that means that that has the correct polarity, so now we check the rest of them with that. Awesome, they all have the correct polarity, and we do with these ones exactly what we did over there. Okay, so I've got all of my magnety things set, and I did end up using araldite because the PVA just wasn't quite holding it together well enough, so I ended up using araldite, using the same process that I used with the PVA. The araldite seems to be holding fairly well. As you can see, I still have them split into 2 piles, but if you bring 2 together, they hold pull apart, magnet's still in there. So we're calling that a success. And they keep grabbing little bits of steel from when we cut the steel bars. But that's a moot point. So now we're going to grab our PVA, shake it up, and we're going to put a bit into the holes that we drilled earlier. And you do want to have a little bit at the bottom. Then we're just going to take one of the ones from this set. This is the board that has holes on both, so this one has 8 holes in it. So it's going to take 8 from one set so that we know that the other 2 boards will clip to this board just fine. So you just take it and plop it down in there. And you want to get it so that it goes down so that it's nice and flush with the board. And then once that PVA is set, we will be able to go over it with some filler just to strengthen up the edge, make it nice and smooth so it looks nice and it clips together well. So now you just do that with the rest of the magnets from that set on your center board, which has the 8 holes drilled into it. Okay, so once you've got that center board done, you can do the boards that will go either side of it, and you do that with your other pile of magnets in the exact same way. And there we go. Now, all you have to do is let them set at least overnight. Because there's no air able to get in there, it will take the PVA a bit longer to set. So leave it for as long as it needs, at least 24 hours. I'm going to leave this for about 48 hours. Okay, so it's been 2 days now and the PVA is pretty much set. It'll take another week or so before it's well and truly set, but it's set enough to be able to test it. And as you can see, you bring the boards in and they just clip together like so. At this stage, because the glue is a little bit wet still, to pull them apart, don't pull them straight apart, twist them and pull them apart like that. Otherwise, you run a risk of pulling a pin or 2 out, which of course is not ideal. So the last thing that we need to do before these boards are ready to have a texture or some trenches cut into them is we need to make these edges a bit nicer, because at the moment they look like foam board, which, I mean, you could leave it like that, but we're not going to. This is where we bring in the gap filler, and we're just going to run a bead of it along the edge, like so. Then we can just use our finger to spread it out over the surface of the edge. And once you've got it spread out across the entire edge, we're going to grab a straight edge. I'm using this ruler, and you just put it at one side of the edge and drag it across. So that you pull off any excess. So we don't really want to build it up too much, we just want it to be nice and flat. Pulling it across on a diagonal can help as well. And when you get build up like this on the edge, and you get a spot that needs filling in a bit, you grab it at the top edge, run it down, so that it all goes off there like so. And now you can pull that across to help fill that bit in. And you also want to make sure that you clean up this edge here and this edge along here. And you want to do that exact same process on every edge, including the ones with the magnets, just to fill in any gaps that are there and make it nice. And then once we get to the stage where we want to carve stuff in and we want to do a good base coat over the top of the whole thing, we'll just base coat the whole thing black then. So there you go. That's part 1 of this epic 6x4 cheap table build, and so far it's pretty good. Just one thing to watch out for though, if you're using a metal ruler to flatten out the filler on the edges to make them have a much nicer finish, I recommend using something that is plastic, not metal, just because you do have those magnets in there and it's gonna grab the metal. Or if you can, use a piece of aluminium, because magnets are not going to, well, grab hold of aluminium, and it'll make it much easier to get a nice smooth finish. So there you go. Let us know what you think in the comment section below, and I want to hear what you think we should texture the surface of this board like. I'm thinking either snowy volcano, swamp, or forest. So chuck your comments down below. Let us know what you think that we should do to finish off this table. And of course, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up so we know that you like it, so we can keep making stuff that you like. And as always, if you want to improve your wargaming, make your tabletop battles more epic, and give your wargaming budget more power, then be sure to smash the crosshair and ding the bell. You'll subscribe and I'll be able to share with you more battle reports, terrain tutorials, and strategies to make your wargaming experience more epic. And I'll see you next time.